The sun was a relentless force, beating down on the cracked asphalt of the gas station as we rolled in, the tires crunching over loose gravel. I wiped the sweat from my brow, feeling the heat seep through my skin, making my clothes cling uncomfortably. Mark, ever the planner, had chosen this desolate spot for our first pit stop, a place that seemed to exist out of time, forgotten by the rush of modern life. Derek, with his sun-bleached hair and a smile that could light up the gloomiest of rooms, hopped out of the car with an energy that was infectious. His laughter echoed off the old, rusting pumps, a sound so foreign in this quiet, almost eerie setting. As I stepped out, the heat hit me like a physical force, and I couldn't help but wonder what adventures lay ahead. But little did I know, the real adventure was about to begin, one that would change everything. Would I be able to keep the secrets that would soon unfold? The sun was a relentless force, beating down on the cracked asphalt of the gas station as we rolled in, the tires crunching over loose gravel. I wiped the sweat from my brow, feeling the heat seep through my skin, making my clothes cling uncomfortably. Mark, ever the planner, had chosen this desolate spot for our first pit stop, a place that seemed to exist out of time, forgotten by the rush of modern life. Derek, with his sun-bleached hair and a smile that could light up the gloomiest of rooms, hopped out of the car with an energy that was infectious. His laughter echoed off the old, rusting pumps, a sound so foreign in this quiet, almost eerie setting. Mark, on the other hand, was methodical, checking the fuel gauge, his movements precise and devoid of the same enthusiasm. As I stepped out, the heat hit me like a physical force, and I couldn't help but wonder what adventures lay ahead. The air was thick with the scent of gasoline and dust, and the distant hum of cicadas filled the silence. Derek, always the charmer, was already chatting up the lone attendant, a grizzled man whose face told stories of hard living. Mark filled the tank, and I wandered over to the small, dilapidated store, its windows caked with dust, the neon sign flickering weakly. Inside, the cool air was a relief, but it was the atmosphere that caught me off guard. The shelves were sparse, stocked with goods that looked like they'd been there for decades. An old radio played a tune from another era, and the only other customer, an elderly woman, gave me a look that seemed to pierce through to my very soul. I felt a strange pull towards the back of the store, where an old, dusty mirror hung, reflecting not just my image, but seemingly a fragment of my soul. As I stood there, lost in the reflection, a soft voice broke through my reverie. "Looking for something?" the elderly woman asked, her voice as weathered as the store itself. "Just browsing," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper, still captivated by the mirror's depth. She nodded, her eyes lingering on me for a moment longer than necessary, before she shuffled away. The store seemed to hold secrets, each item whispering tales of travelers who had passed through, leaving bits of their lives behind. Outside, Derek's laughter mingled with the clink of coins as he paid for the gas. I could hear Mark's voice, low and steady, discussing something with the attendant. The contrast between their energies was stark. Derek's was like a vibrant flame, while Mark's was the steady glow of a lantern. I turned from the mirror, the spell broken, and walked towards the front of the store. The heat outside was a shock after the cool, musty air of the store. Derek was now leaning against the car, his shirt slightly unbuttoned, revealing just enough to make me blush. He caught my eye and winked, that mischievous grin spreading across his face. "You find anything interesting in there?" he asked, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as he leaned closer. "Just an old mirror," I said, feeling a warmth spread through me that wasn't just from the sun. Mark returned, his expression unreadable as he looked between Derek and me. There was a moment of silence, heavy with unspoken thoughts. "Let's get going," Mark said. With Mark out of sight, the atmosphere in the car shifted. Derek's laughter faded, replaced by a charged silence. I turned to look at him, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. Without thinking, I unbuckled my seatbelt and moved to the back seat. Derek watched me, his expression unreadable. The air was thick with unspoken words, and before I could second-guess myself, I leaned in and kissed him. It was a moment of madness, a fleeting escape from the monotony of my life. The kiss was brief, but it felt like an eternity, charged with the thrill of the forbidden. The moment our lips parted, reality crashed back into focus. Derek's eyes searched mine, a mix of surprise and something darker, something that hinted at consequences. My heart pounded in my chest, not just from the kiss, but from the sudden realization of what I had done. We didn't speak. There was nothing to say that could undo the moment or explain it away. I moved back to my seat, the leather cool against my now flushed skin. Derek turned his gaze forward, his jaw set, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by a tension that seemed to fill the car. The drive continued in silence, each mile adding to the weight of my impulsive act. I stole glances at Derek, trying to read his thoughts, but his profile was as unreadable as the desert landscape outside. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the road, mirroring the shadows that now stretched between us. As we approached our next stop, the tension was palpable. I knew I had to address it, to confront the elephant in the car. "Derek," I started, my voice barely above a whisper, "about what happened." He cut me off, his voice low, "We should forget it. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." His words were like a cold splash of water, sobering and harsh. But could we really just forget? The kiss, though fleeting, had ignited something within me, a spark of desire that was both exhilarating and terrifying. It wasn't just about the kiss, it was about the breach of trust, the betrayal of Mark. The sound of the gas pump clicking off outside snapped us back to reality. I quickly returned to the front seat, my heart racing, my mind a whirlwind of guilt and exhilaration. Derek's face was a mask of calm, but his eyes betrayed a hint of confusion or perhaps regret. Mark returned, oblivious to the storm he had missed. He slid into the driver's seat, commenting on the heat, completely unaware of the electric tension that had just dissipated. We continued our journey, the car now filled with a different kind of silence, one heavy with secrets. As the road stretched ahead, my thoughts were a tangled mess. The kiss with Derek replayed in my mind, each moment vivid and charged with the thrill of the forbidden. I glanced at Derek, his profile etched against the setting sun, his jaw set in a way that spoke volumes of his internal conflict. I knew I had to say something, to break the silence that was as oppressive as the heat outside. "Derek," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the hum of the engine, "about what happened." He didn't look at me, his gaze fixed on the road. "We should forget it. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness." His words were like a cold splash of water, sobering and harsh. But could we really just forget? The kiss, though fleeting, had ignited something within me, a spark of desire that was both exhilarating and terrifying. It wasn't just about the kiss, it was about the breach of trust, the betrayal of Mark, who was sitting right there, unaware of the storm brewing in the back seat. The car moved forward, each mile adding to the weight of my impulsive act. I stole glances at Derek, trying to read his thoughts, but his profile was as unreadable as the desert landscape outside. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the road, mirroring the shadows that now stretched between us. The silence was broken only by the occasional sound of Mark shifting gears or the soft crackle of the radio, which played a tune that felt out of place with the tension inside the car. I felt the urge to confess, to let the truth spill out like the gas had from days past, and the trip continued with a veneer of normalcy. Derek and I avoided being alone together, our interactions polite but distant. Yet, the memory of that kiss lingered like a ghost between us. One evening, as we set up camp, Mark, in a rare moment of vulnerability, expressed his insecurities about Derek's presence, fearing he was losing me to the excitement Derek brought into our lives. The guilt was overwhelming, and I nearly confessed, but Derek's subtle shake of the head stopped me. We decided then, without words, to keep our secret, to protect Mark from the pain of betrayal. The nights grew cooler, and the stars seemed to watch us with a knowing gaze. Each time Derek and I were near each other, the air would thicken, charged with an unspoken tension. It was as if the desert itself held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. One night, as Mark was engrossed in his map, plotting our next move, Derek and I found ourselves alone by the fire. The flames danced, casting shadows that flickered across his face, highlighting the conflict in his eyes. "We can't keep doing this," I whispered, the words escaping like steam from a kettle. "It's tearing us apart." Derek's gaze met mine, his eyes dark pools of regret and desire. "I know," he said, his voice low, almost lost in the crackle of the fire. "But how do we undo what's been done?" The question hung in the air, as heavy as the smoke from our campfire. I wanted to reach out, to touch him, to feel that electric connection again, but the weight of our secret held me back. The next morning, the tension was palpable. Mark, sensing something amiss, tried to lighten the mood with tales of our past adventures, but his words felt hollow. Derek and I exchanged glances, each look a silent plea for understanding, for forgiveness. As we packed up, I found myself next to Derek, our hands brushing as we folded the tent. The touch sent a jolt through me, a reminder of what we had shared. "We need to talk," I murmured, my voice barely above the rustling of the trip ended, and we returned to our lives, the adventure now a memory, but the kiss at the gas station remained a silent specter in our marriage. Mark never found out, and life resumed its predictable rhythm. Yet, every time Derek's name came up, or when we passed that gas station on subsequent trips, I felt the weight of that moment. It wasn't just about the kiss, it was about the realization of my own desires, the thrill of the unknown, and the complexity of human emotions. Derek moved away again, and life with Mark continued, but that moment at the gas station had subtly shifted the foundation of our relationship, leaving a crack that was invisible but ever-present. The years rolled by, and the memory of that kiss became less about the act itself and more about what it symbolized. It was a moment of weakness, yes, but also a moment of truth. I often wondered, what would happen if the truth ever came to light? Would it shatter the fragile peace we had built, or would it open the door to a deeper understanding? One evening, as Mark and I sat in our living room, the TV casting a soft glow over the room, he brought up Derek out of the blue. "You know, I always felt like there was something off about that trip," he said, his eyes not leaving the screen. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my composure, my voice steady as I replied, "What do you mean?" "Just a feeling," he shrugged, not pressing further, but his words lingered in the air like smoke from a snuffed-out candle. The thought of the truth coming out haunted me. It wasn't just the fear of losing Mark, but also the fear of losing the version of myself I had carefully reconstructed after that trip. I had become someone who valued loyalty, who cherished the stability of our life together. Yet, the memory of that kiss, that brief lapse into desire, made me question if I truly knew myself at all. I imagined scenarios where Mark found out. Would he confront Derek? Would he leave me? Or would he, in some twisted way, understand? The possibilities were endless, each one more unsettling than the last. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.